Part 2 of the 2019-20 law changes is going to cover the new rules regarding administration of cards to coaches. While this sounds like a simple adjustment, IFAB has added a great deal of specific rules regarding the when and what of issuing cards to coaches. Let's spin through the wording of the law here and its effect on how we will be managing the technical areas moving forward. The primary clause for this important new modification is in Law 5. It states, "The referee takes action against team officials who fail to act in a responsible manner and warns or shows a yellow card for a caution or a red card for a sending off from the field of play and its immediate surroundings, including the technical area. If the offender cannot be identified, the senior coach present in the technical area will receive the sanction." We will get into all of the details here momentarily, but this clause is the one that now empowers the referee to issue cards to coaches. IFAB tested this clause in leagues around the world last year and has now chosen to implement it permanently due to the positive effect it had on communicating sanctions against team officials and decreasing the amount of misbehavior from them. Law 12 goes into far greater detail on the actions that can result in discipline against team officials. Let's explore those clauses here. IFAB starts by listing behaviors that should result in a verbal warning. A verbal warning means no display of a card and no formal sanction. These behaviors include entering the field of play in a respectful or non-confrontational manner without permission, failing to cooperate with a match official, for example, ignoring an instruction or request from an assistant referee or the fourth official, minor or low-level disagreement by word or action with a decision, and occasionally leaving the confines of the technical area without committing another offense. Minnesota officials should recognize a few of these behaviors as having been classified under the ask portion of the old ask, tell, dismiss procedure. It's important to recognize that these behaviors listed above upon first occurrence should only result in a verbal warning. Remember, team officials are not permitted to leave the technical area without the permission of the referee. The wording in this section of Law 12, however, makes it abundantly clear that game officials are not supposed to bring a hammer down on a coach who is guilty of minor violations and has not yet been warned. The coach who steps onto the field out of concern for an injured player, the coach who keeps wandering up to the touchline and gets in the assistant referee's way, the coach who throws his or her arms up in frustration in response to a call, the coach who repeatedly wanders out of his or her technical area to give instructions. First time you talk to a coach for one of these issues, it should be a verbal warning. Only if these offenses are repeated after a warning or are blatant should the referee be considering issuing a card to the coach. A blatant offense would be, for example, not just refusing to comply with a request to stay out of the assistant referee's way, but then saying something snarky or disrespectful in response. Or not just stepping a yard or two outside the technical area to pass instructions to his or her team, but actually wandering down the touchline more than 5 to 10 yards from the technical area to do so. Law 12 states the following possible offenses that would result in a caution to a team official. Importantly, it notes that this list is not by any means the only behaviors that can result in a caution, but are the most commonly seen behaviors. The first two, clearly or persistently not respecting the confines of the team's technical area, or persistent unacceptable behavior including repeated warning offenses. Notice that repeated occurrences of the warning behaviors, such as persistently failing to respect the confines of the technical area, persistent unacceptable behavior, are now listed as clear reasons to caution a coach. Delaying the restart of play by their team. Delaying the restart of play by their team means that coaches can now be held accountable for overtly or publicly instructing their players to delay restarts. Maybe this isn't a reason we're going to reach for a yellow card the first time we hear it. We likely all have heard the leading coach late in a close game telling their team to, quote, take their time or, quote, slow it down when the ball goes out for a goal kick or throw-in. This is now a good time to politely and firmly remind the coach that A, you are adding time, and B, if he or she continues to advocate for delaying restarts, you are empowered to issue a caution. Deliberate physical acts such as Grabbing the ball or booting it further away from the field after it has left play would also fall under this clause and certainly do not require a verbal warning first. It is important to note, however, that all delay actions that result in a caution are limited to incidents where the team official's team controls the restart. As we will shortly see, when the other team controls the restart, we don't have to be as restrained. Deliberately entering the technical area of the opposing team in a non-confrontational manner. Let's focus on the words deliberate and non-confrontational in this clause. An example of this would be running into the other team's technical area to grab a ball that has gone out of play, or entering the opposing technical area to break up a confrontation. Both of these examples would be deliberate acts to enter the opposing technical area, but also non-confrontational. The coach is not in the opposing technical area to start trouble. The opposing team's technical area is sacred territory, and we really do not want team officials from the other team in there. It's asking for trouble. Coaches should understand this rule without any need for explanation. The next three clauses are dissent by word or action, which includes throwing or kicking drinks, bottles, or other objects, or gestures which show a clear lack of respect for the match officials, such as sarcastic clapping, gesturing or acting in a provocative or inflammatory manner, and showing a lack of respect for the game. We used to define kicking or throwing objects in dissent of an official's decision as grounds for immediate dismissal. IFAB has redefined these behaviors as cautionable offenses. It has lumped these in with gestures that demonstrate a clear lack of respect for the officials. By using the word gestures, IFAB is clearly defining this section of Law 12 as being publicly visual behaviors, and these are defined as cautionable. Dissent by word is also clearly defined here. Dissent should be managed with the same approach that we take with players. It should be public, persistent, and/or provocative to result in a formal sanction with a card. There is an emphasis on the qualifier public. Dissent that is quietly moaning about another official's decision and is simply overheard by chance by the benchside assistant or fourth official is not considered cautionable. The dissent needs to be public if it is heard by an official, but also not directed at an official who hears it. On the other hand, the dissent could be provocative, and if it's directed at the official in question, such as yelling or saying to the benchside assistant referee, AR, I don't think you know what you're doing, that would certainly be cautionable even if it wasn't heard out on the field. If there's clear disrespect in an address that is made directly to an official, it should be managed harshly. Acting in a provocative manner and showing a lack of respect for the game would be exemplified by actions or comments that are simply unsporting. Verbally confronting an opposing player or being disrespectful to any players, including their own, could be defined as provocative, inflammatory, or demonstrating a lack of respect for the game. Excessively or persistently gesturing for a red or yellow card. IFAB has for years been trying to get this out of the game. It likely is trying to use team officials as an example. Say there's a hard foul on the field and the coach waves an imaginary card. Our recommendation is to use a firm verbal warning first. Coach, put your arm down. Asking for a card is grounds for sanction. This should be executed like we would a tell in the old ask, tell, dismiss protocol. If the coach continues to wave or does it again later in the match, caution the coach. Lastly, we have a long list of specific send-off offenses for team officials. Let's work our way through this list. First, delaying the restart of play by the opposing team. For example, holding onto the ball, kicking the ball away, or obstructing the movement of a player. In contrast to a caution to a team official for delaying the restart of play, if that team official is delaying a restart for the other team, this is now a send-off offense. The key feature on team official delay offenses is keeping track of which team controls the restart. Second, deliberately leaving the technical area to qualifiers, show dissent towards or remonstrate with a match official, or act in a provocative or inflammatory manner. On par with the instructions that were provided under Ask, Tell, Dismiss, if a team official leaves the technical area for the explicit reason to dissent a call, let's say charging down the touchline to protest a goal or offside decision, this is grounds for a straight red card. One and the same if the team official leaves the technical area and is acting provocative or inflammatory, say yelling at an opposing coach, player, or even a spectator, it is grounds for a sending off as well. Third, entering the opposing technical area in an aggressive or confrontational manner. As opposed to the cautionable offense for entering the opposing technical area, the team official is sent off if he or she enters the opposing technical area to start a confrontation. An example of this would be a coach participating in a mass confrontation rather than trying to break it up, or a coach confronting an opposing player or team official by entering their technical area. No breaks on this. The team official needs to be sent off. Fourth, deliberately throwing or kicking an object onto the field of play. Kicking or throwing an object in dissent is a cautionable offense, but if that object winds up on the field of play, it's a whole different ballgame. Remember, the field is sacrosanct, so chucking anything onto the field of play is never acceptable, even if it's by accident. That being said, when it's on purpose, it's an easy red card as well. Entering the field of play to confront a match official, including at halftime and full-time, or interfering with play, an opposing player, or one of the match officials. Obviously, if a team official enters the field of play for the reason to interfere with an opposing player or match official, it's a red card that makes sense. It's important to note, however, that IFAB has codified confronting a match official during halftime or after the match is grounds for a send-off. Let's qualify this before anybody gets too excited. A controlled discussion is not a confrontation. It is key for the referee to evaluate the team official's behavior and words for disrespect. If the team official confronts you at halftime or after the match on the field and is not respectful, he or she should be sent off. But simply asking a question or requesting an explanation is not disrespectful. Asking a follow-up question is not disrespectful. Listen carefully for editorializing judgment or clapback. If that happens, you can use any level of action you see fit, a verbal warning, a caution, or a send-off, whatever you feel would be appropriate. The laws empower you to red card a coach who has approached you between or after periods of play and has acted in a disrespectful manner. Using offensive, insulting, or abusive language or gestures, or receiving a second caution in the same match. These two are pretty straightforward and do not require explanation. Using unauthorized electronic or communication equipment and/or behaving in an inappropriate manner as the result of using electronic or communication equipment. We have covered this in past years as well. Applying this to the level of matches that we work, this clause is strictly limited to a situation where a dismissed or suspended coach is using a cell phone or radio to communicate with a fellow coach who is still coaching the team during the match. The problem is, you kind of have to know that this is exactly what's going on. If you sent off a coach earlier in the match and he or she is watching from a field or two away and you see that that coach is on a cell phone and then you see the new acting head coach on his or her cell phone and you hear that coach talking about tactics, that's about the only situation where you can put two and two together and now send off the acting head coach as well under this new clause. Otherwise, please don't go looking to make more problems. The reason this rule exists is to ensure that professional coaches do not participate in professional matches from which they are dismissed or suspended. It's not for us run-of-the-mill referees to go looking to antagonize youth coaches. If you see something suspicious, don't go throwing more red cards based solely on your suspicions. Just report the behavior to the competition authority so the team or club can be firmly reminded of the limitations of the coach's suspension. Incidentally, if somebody does walk up to you at halftime or after a game to show you a video of a mistake that you made on their cell phone or their video camera, this is behaving in an inappropriate manner as the result of using electronic equipment. In this day and age, we hear all sorts of stories of parents either approaching referees directly to show them some mistake that they recorded or giving the video device to the coach so that the coach can show the mistake to the official. Our games aren't using VAR. This is somebody throwing a mistake in your face. If it's a coach, send them off. If it's a parent, find the coach and have them dismiss the parent from the field and put it in your match report. Physical or aggressive behavior, including spitting or biting towards an opposing player, substitute, team official, match official, spectator, or any other person, ball boy, ball girl, security, or competition official, or violent conduct. I'm not wholly sure why these each have their own bullet point, as physical or aggressive behavior to quote any other person would seem to fall under violent conduct anyway. I suppose violent conduct includes conduct towards a team official's own players, substitutes, or fellow team officials. Either way, this is a no-brainer. Before we move on, I'd like to take a moment to discuss how this law change specifically affects our involvement in the management of youth soccer matches. One of the more common questions that we have gotten over the years is, what do we do with a coach who's being publicly and overly hard and disrespectful to his or her own players? Guess what? That can probably be defined as, quote, acting in a provocative manner. If you hear a coach berating his or her players at halftime in an inappropriate manner, you can now intervene and remind the coach to tone it down or even caution the coach for unsporting behavior. As you will or have seen in the new Safe Sport guidelines for officials, we have a responsibility to eliminate emotional harassment from youth sports. This modification to Law 12 empowers officials to provide that protection under the laws of the game. We strongly suggest that intervention into a coach berating his or her own player or players start with a verbal warning. Coach, if I can hear you, so can everybody else. I need you to reduce the volume, and I also need to remind you that emotional harassment of your players is something that I have been advised I am required to report. If the coach snaps at you to mind your own business or turns around and uses abusive language at you, then you can issue a caution or send-off. Over the years, many referees have attempted to utilize the proper technique to have a coach deal with inappropriate parental comments at matches by asking the coach to cross the field and speak to the parents. Unfortunately, there is a small subpopulation of coaches who believe that this is not their responsibility, and either refuse to cooperate or, air quotes, cooperate by screaming across the field to their parents to, quote, shut up or, quote, be quiet. MNSRC considers such behavior to be, quote, showing disrespect for the game. Refusing to comply with a referee's request and instead acting in this manner is now clearly a cautionable offense. Before you all hear this and get excited about the opportunity to slap some irreverent coach or assistant with a card for refusing to help, let's set a proper protocol for this situation. When you have to suspend a match for spectator behavior, you go to the coach or coaches and advise them that you need them to cross the field and calmly, use that word, calmly, remind their parents to focus on cheering for their team and not at yelling at opponents or the referees. If the team officials give you guff over this, now firmly remind them that you have the ability to interpret their lack of cooperation as a lack of respect for the game. If they subsequently scream across the field at their fans to shut up, immediately point out that you asked them to cross and have a calm conversation with their parents, not scream across the field. A caution should only be administered if they refuse to comply with your instructions. Be patient and be clear with those instructions. If you caution, you are still going to hold them to following instructions. Coach, you are not complying with my request, and you are now showing a lack of respect for the game. You are cautioned for unsporting behavior. Please comply with my request immediately, or I will have to further sanction you. If they still refuse to cross, then go ahead and issue the second caution and send the coach off. Then turn to the next coach and ask them to comply. Coach, I really do not want to keep issuing cards until I have dismissed all of the coaches and we have to terminate the match. Coaches are responsible for managing their fans, and you need to do it in a manner that honors the game, not by yelling across the field. I'm on your side here, but you have to show respect for my request. The SRC is glad to see that formal sanctioning is now possible under the laws of the game, But we also do not want referees using cards as a convenient shortcut to dealing with coaches who may not quite understand what their own responsibilities are. Please make sure that you are always clear in your verbal communication and give coaches an opportunity to comply before resorting to misconduct. That covers all of the codified behaviors that can result in verbal warnings, cautions, and send-offs to team officials. There's a few more caveats in this law change that we still have to cover. There are some specific exceptions allotted for if the misbehaving team official also happens to be a medical provider. For example, let's say the home team's designated athletic trainer, a team official who is listed on the roster, curses at you when he or she is on the field. You can now issue a red card to the trainer, but because that trainer is essential personnel for the safety of the players, the trainer cannot be forced to depart the field. It becomes the senior team officials, and for the rest of this presentation, we're going to call the senior team official the head coach, responsibility to ensure that the dismissed medical personnel does not interfere further with the match. As you will find out on our next slide, you have a means of dealing with things if that head coach can't get the medical personnel to knock it off. You still report the sending off to the competition authority, as undoubtedly the trainer will be suspended for at least the next match, which creates headaches for his or her organization. It's not like there won't be any punishment, you just can't make the trainer leave that game. Finally, we're going to go back to that Law 5 clause one more time and emphasize a particular part of it that gives referees a tremendous amount of management power. Quote, if the offender cannot be identified, the senior coach present in the technical area will receive the sanction. Let's say you hear somebody in the technical area call you a dirty name but can't tell who it was. The card goes to the head coach. This has always been an informal tactic used in competitions like college and high school where coaches previously could be carded, but it was an informal tactic, not a codified rule. IFAB has gone a step further and actually put this into the law book. If you don't quite understand how useful this clause can be, let me explain. Let's say you're running down the field and you hear the assistant coach loudly and therefore publicly say, quote, this referee must be blind. Now, you know it was the assistant coach, but the red bench doesn't know that A, you heard it, and B, you know it was the assistant coach. So at the next stoppage, you hold up the restart, calmly walk to the red technical area, approach the red head coach, and caution him for dissent. You tell him, somebody on this bench called me blind. That's dissent. I don't know who said it. The laws dictate that you have to get the card. I'm sorry if it wasn't you, but please be careful from here on out and make sure that neither you or anybody else in your technical area forces me to consider a second caution to you. That would really be unfortunate. As you might imagine, the head coach is not going to be pleased if he or she gets sent off and has to serve a suspension because one of the other team officials or a substitute decides to pop off again. If you're having a difficult time with somebody on one of the benches and you feel like you need a bit of help to get things under control, well, nothing is going to make a head coach angrier than one of his or her stupid players or assistants getting him or her kicked out of the game. Be smart and you can effectively fix this behavior without ever having to deal with the guilty person directly. That concludes the information on technical area misconduct law changes. We have one more presentation for the law changes to go, in which we will cover the extensive changes to the handling clause in Law 12.